This program is sponsored in part by the National Catholic Society of Foresters. Hello again, and welcome to Looking at Social Justice. I'm Jim Grant, your host, and it's my pleasure to have back in our studio a guest that comes to us after 12 years of not being back in our studio. Sister Denise Lawrence was here visiting again with the Brahma Kumaris World Spirituality Organization back in the day and sharing a fantastic workshop, which I have notes of. And when I was preparing to visit with you today, Sister, it was so great to see that what you talked about then, about the idea of the need for us to get in touch with our inner persons to be able to appreciate the values that we are trying to communicate in our families and in our society. It does depend a lot on ourselves. With that opening thought, I want you to know we are so glad that the Doctors Kapoor have brought you back to Fresno to do a workshop. We are here on May 3rd, 2019, the day after the installation of our Bishop Joseph Brennan. But today, instead of having you talk about what you'll speak to the people, I'm asking you to address the climate situation in our world, the care for our common home that Pope Francis has challenged us to look at from the eyes of Brahma Kumaris World Spirituality Organization. But first of all, you're going to have to tell us a little bit about Brahma Kumaris and how it is that that organization, for which you have been a member since '74, has led you to not only do meditation and Raja Yoga on all the continents almost, and how it is that that led you to be an expert on ecological issues and the environment. Besides that inner work, you are very committed to the outer work. Introduce us, Sister. Talk about yourself and Brahma Kumaris.
I've been 45 years doing this, and that's a lifetime. So as you grow from being a young adult through to the twilight years, coming up there, you pass through many stages, and the world has passed through a lot of stages. I remember being very active politically in the 1960s when the ideas about climate change first emerged with Susan Sontag's book called Silent Spring. And I have always been very close to nature. I spend a lot of time in nature, in the mountains, by the ocean, by the rivers. I hike a lot, all of these things. And nature calls you to the inner world, doesn't it? And if you are in tune with nature, in tune with yourself, and in tune with the divine, then you're in harmony. And this is how humanity and the earth are supposed to be. So the Brahma Kumaris is a university. That means you study what exactly is the human spirit, what exactly are the laws that govern the relationship between you and yourself, between you and your fellow human being, between you and God, and between you and the natural world. Because these laws are similar to the laws of physics. You can't change them. You must abide by them, otherwise there will be consequences. And this is what people are finding. So the Brahma Kumaris is a non-government organization since 1981 with the UN, and very active in everything to do with the environment and the Conference of Parties, COP, which is a conference that is with government and non-government organizations, and this is through this that a lot of these climate change accords and treaties have been put together. And the Brahma Kumaris always talks about the spiritual component in all of these things, because, you know, in Brahma Kumaris you study what it means to be a spiritual being operating through a physical body in the material world, in the eyes of God, you see, or under the care of God, who is the Creator, who has made us human beings into the trustees of the earth, the stewards of the earth. And in you know, in the native peoples here, there is a word, Kayaniskatski. I don't know if you know this word.
No.
There's a film by that name with a wonderful soundtrack by, I forgot his name now for a second, but it's a beautiful soundtrack. And it's really says that destruction occurs through imbalance. And this is really what we're looking at in spirituality, because spirituality, you're striving for a perfect world. And perfection is not some sort of an extreme thing. It's all about balance. And the natural world is all about balance. And the impact of humanity on the natural world is all about disturbing that balance. And this is why, to some extent, we have this question of climate change. And since I've been in the States, I came here from Europe, and I found that people are unaware that in Europe there's a huge movement called Extinction Rebellion. You haven't heard of that, right?
Not that exact word, but we do know that in this country, for some reason, there's a resistance to almost everything that your opening statement has been. This idea of understanding balance, the understanding that there is the need to actually appreciate the creation that God has given us, but that Europe, secular though it may be, has a tremendously more attuned culture to what you're talking about. So tell us more about, since you've been all over the world, you're British born, but then you have studied in France, you did much time in Germany, you've been in the United States for a long time. You have this worldwide understanding. Why is it that you think Europe is so much more able to appreciate the gravity of the situation than the United States?
Well, in this particular case, it is because there's a young girl from Sweden, Greta Thunberg, yeah? And she has really galvanized the young people. And this is what we find anywhere in the world that you go. You talk to kids, and they are feeling there's no future. They are feeling there will be no planet. And so they have a very strong emotional reaction to this. So this young girl galvanized the kids to go on strike and not go to school on Fridays.
It's actually today, as we're recording this program on May 3rd, that there is across our country, but led by young people, because old people right now, like me,
And me.
We're doing what we're doing, almost avoiding the hard choices that have to be made, that our young are telling us, not asking, telling us, take care of this planet.
But you know, the problem is that it's very difficult to identify to what extent a human being can make a difference. Of course you can make a difference, but for example, one of the things, and I've studied as much as I can about it, one of the problems on the planet is the southern hemisphere is getting oriented north magnetically. I don't think a human being did that. and the northern hemisphere is getting oriented south magnetically. So in 23 degrees it is tilted, but it's wobbling more than it did before. And I don't know if that's having that's a human effect. The sun is having way more storms than it did, and I don't know if we can say that human beings caused that. The meltdown of the Arctic, the Antarctic, the rise in sea level, and the disturbance in climate, the jet stream has moved somewhere else. The Gulf Stream is no longer going where it was. So all of these things are why I brought up this word Kayanisgatsky, and the person who did the soundtrack was Philip Glass, extraordinary composer of the present age. And, you know, people, the intellectuals, the artists, the spiritual people, the mystics, whoever, they're very in tune with what's going to happen, more than others who are dealing with what is happening or what we probably can avoid. And the young people, they have their whole life in front of them. For us, you know, we were active 50 years ago, 60 years ago, and we did what we could, and now we don't have that kind of energy, and we are not able to keep up with all the high-tech stuff that's going on because our brains don't work so well. What can I say? We're doing our best. But the spiritual component is interesting because the spiritual practice creates atmosphere. And nature is very sensitive to the thoughts of people. And there was work done by some scientific people about plants, how they respond if you look after them very carefully, very hands-on. They like it a lot. And if you disregard them, they don't cooperate. So though they may not have souls, right, but they are very sensitive, you know. And if you are thinking of a mountain as your mountain, you know, and that mountain also thinks of you, in a sense, as my person, you know. So there is a very profound relationship, which I think the native peoples here are very sensitive to. And because we are a little bit more materialistically minded, or whatever, the way we're trained, the way we're educated, we think it's just a thing, it doesn't matter. But spirituality makes you sensitive that, no, you know, recently there are so many articles in the media about how trees communicate with each other underground through fungi, you know. Now, a spiritual person can feel that, but then a biologist has to actually see what's going on, and then they can know that from that angle. And I think that, you know, if you think about when the Apollo space program was going on and the space astronauts were out there and they were looking back at the beautiful blue pearl, which you could put your thumb over, and everything that had any meaning for these human beings who are so far from it is all there on this planet. And this planet which is going through, I would say, renovation. Because renovation is normal. And there are people who have done work on the world as a slowly evolving thing. But there's one man who was doing a lot of work on this in the 1960s and 70s by the name of Immanuel Velikovsky from Princeton University, and he was really pushed out because it didn't suit the conventional way of looking at things. But he was a paleontologist, and he found in stones and rocks indicators of every so often cataclysmic change. And if you look in the Bible, you will see that this whole cycle of the Bible is a 6,000-year cycle. And then after that comes New Jerusalem, is that right?
In certain readings, people will actually almost date something like that.
They
Not
do.
everybody would
Yeah.
be keeping track of those years, but others, certain people definitely, sister, mark dates.
And one thing that I find of great interest is the idea of this phrase, you know, in the beginning was the Word. And what did God say? You know, if God says, let there be light, that could be turn on the sun, but it could be, may you be enlightened, and may you understand a few things about how humanity works and how the world works and what is your relationship. This is also an interpretation. And, you know, we do want to be in communion with that supreme intelligence. This is what we mean by meditation. And we also practice in our spiritual practice to draw energy from the Supreme Being and sort of become like radio stations and send it out, transmitters. And love is a very, very powerful energy. And love for the world includes love for the human world as well as love for the people of the world. And you don't say, okay, I love this set of people but not that set of people. You know, that's very limited. If you say God is the Father of all the souls, right? We say, Our Father who art in heaven. That doesn't mean you're the father of some of us and not other of us, they're cousins or whatever. But, you know, the whole of the human race is directly affected by the disintegration of the balances and the systems of the natural world. So we're all in this together.
Would I have a question that goes back to the statements you had made earlier about it's obvious that there are things happening beyond human control.
Right.
Meaning not human caused.
Right.
I think what we're looking at a lot, at least through my eyes, is rather the effects that we are causing.
Mm-hmm.
But what you're doing is helping us appreciate certain things are not human caused and therefore can't be human changed.
Well, not necessarily.
Okay, good.
But what I think is the problem of putting your finger on things that are not human caused is it makes people very afraid because they feel they're not in control.
Exactly.
But I think that, you know, I personally feel God is in charge. And God is extremely intelligent and not stupid at all. People, sometimes you get people who do stupid things. Okay, fair enough. But, you know, in comparison, you know, what would God say, I think, to people? He would say, you know what? I am the creator. You know this, right? So I am the creator, and every so often I have to do a renovation on the house, you know?
It almost sounds, but I don't think it's going there, that there's a certain letting go of the human component in what would be needing to be done. Like in Laudato Si, which is on Care for Our Common Home from the Pope, which is 4 years old this week. It's sort of like a message that Pope Francis gave to us. We're working with it. He would admit, like you, the importance of understanding God is the creator and it's God's world, but it's our common home. Yes. So I wonder, in the minutes left, we got like 8.5, would you be able to help us see things that Brahma Kumaris might be committed to in the sense of responding to what might be the human things that we are doing? Because if there's things that are passing cyclically, and I would say, I think you're right, a lot of people would think that that's all that's going on is cyclical stuff. Can't change it, Jim. Get used to it. This happened before many, many millions of years ago. Yeah, but I'm living right now, and I'm seeing it happen in my generation, the melting in the Arctic. What, sister, do you see us being able to do as people of faith to do something positive to address the issue? What does Brahma Kumaris do?
What Brahma Kumaris do, you have to distinguish what you can do and what you can't do. You can't unmelt the Arctic, that's out of range. You can't, I mean, I was last Christmas in Tahiti, which is where all the whales go to get born. You know, and what's happening with the whales is they're jumping out of the ocean into boats. Why? Because it's acid. Now, that's human caused. And individually, all the plastic waste, we can do something about that. What we eat. You know, Brahma Kumaris have seen that like the Amazon is being devastated because the area is being used to feed cattle. And it's much more efficient to use land and be vegetarian because you don't impact on the land nearly so much, and it means there's much more food to go around. You don't use so much water. Soft drinks, use 16 times. 16 times you have one, bottle of soft drink. You need 16 of those water to make that one. So your water is going to be depleted. So a lot of the industrial processes that humans have devised to make life more pleasant, more comfortable, whatever, we can do something about that, you see. And so what an individual chooses to do is going to impact the supply and demand. And so if there's no demand for items that are damaging to the environment, that is something that a human being can do. So in Brahma Kumaris, we use this word karma, which means action and the laws of action and reaction and so on. So we try to make our karma as environmental friendly as possible, to live as green as possible, to also care for everything, whatever we can care for, including animals, including, bees. Do you know that bees are very responsive if you love them? You can stroke them, they're not going to sting you. You have to take care of them. You have to create gardens where the bees can come along and drink some nectar. And there's just many, many things that can happen in cities because the insects, you see, are dying and reducing drastically because of pesticides. And the pesticides are in the country, but not in the city. So then the cities are very good places where the insect population can, restore itself. And there is, I think, this very deep, like almost emotional connection between the wildlife and the people. And if the habitats are being eroded by housing and so many things, which they are, then the wildlife is coming into the cities. Rome is full of wild pigs. London is full of foxes.
You're talking about animals, right?
Animals.
I'm just kidding.
No, I mean animals, not. But you see people who are, for one reason or another, out of touch with themselves, out of touch with nature, out of touch with the spiritual component. They are spiritually very depleted. And so they will be, unthinking consumers, which is very good if you just want people to spend money, but you have to think of triple bottom line, not just single bottom line. Triple bottom line includes, okay, how much money you can make, that's one bottom line. Second bottom line is, are you benefiting the people? Because when you create a big business, there's employees and people and all of this. And third is, what is your impact on the environment? So this corporate responsibility is something quite important. Like now, fossil fuels, okay, so we have the electrical cars, and I like those very much, you know. And where I live in Germany, everybody's going on bicycles everywhere. Very good. Why can't you go on bicycle? Why can't you walk? If you walk, you don't have to go to the gym. At least that's what I do. Or you swim, or you know, these things. So there are many things that you can do. And then with the things that are out of range, you can be a conduit for the energy of God through your prayer and meditation, for that, you know, the sun, the oceans, the currents, everything to be reset, which is something that is more in the hands of the Creator than the humans.
This last bit, when you gave us this litany of concrete personal conversions, is exactly in sync with Pope Francis. He is admitting he is going to leave science to science, but the conversion of the soul, the commitment of the individual, and the conversion of countries, economies. Today, which this Youth Day of protest, standing up for climate justice, we call it. There was a young lady I heard on the radio saying, you know, I'm from a farmland. So the city is very progressive where I live, but the country area, the rural area, not so much. We need to address the issue not only in these progressive cities, but in the rural lands, so that the economy, which is so dependent on fossil fuels, that we will see a way to convert that so that people will have a different career, but they will also feel that that has been a good decision that they made. We can't just be angry at the way things are going, but decide what we're going to do.
Yes, exactly.
We used up our first program, sister, all about the commitment of the community of faith, be it Catholic or Brahma Kumaris, to address climate justice. We hope you'll be back again and share with us something like your book, which we didn't even talk about. Next time, we'll talk about this. Thank you, Sister Denise.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Jim.